All right, well, let's get on to this book of yours, Church of Cowards. Great title, great face on the front cover there. If you had no glasses and a longer beard and long hair, you might look like Jesus.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't really know what Jesus looked for, but I'll take it.
Pictures of Jesus that
Yeah.
I see. So how did you get to writing this book? I have read almost all of it, you'll be pleased to hear. I
Oh.
know as an author myself, there's nothing more infuriating with people interviewing you, and you can tell they've not read the book at all.
Yeah.
I've been reading bits of it to my wife, and I found it really enjoyable and edifying, I have to say.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think 90% of the interviews I've done, they haven't read it, so it's fine.
Church of Cowards. So what do you mean by a wake-up call to... Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's always it. Yeah, I think the book is my attempt to address what I think is the great problem in the church in the West, anyways, that we are so comfortable and complacent. We're sort of floating on the tide of the culture and going wherever the culture takes us. And we dress that up. We dress up our complacency and apathy and cowardice in words like tolerance and acceptance, which makes it, so that we can not only be lazy and cowardly, but we can feel virtuous in our laziness and cowardice. And I think that's the problem. And I think in one of the early chapters, I draw the comparison between what we go through in the West, and if you look at Christians other places in the world where they face violent persecution, it's worse than it's ever been in history, in fact, although the media doesn't talk about it, so you would never know. And for them, if they stand up for their faith, they could be, they face machetes and knives and guns and rocks and everything. Yet what you find there is that the faith is still vibrant and alive, and we know that because these are people willing to die for it, for what they believe. And it's just interesting that here we have faced really nothing even close to that, anywhere in that ballpark. The most we will face, persecution-wise, most of us, is just insults, awkward looks, frowny face emojis someone might throw at us on Facebook, which could be very devastating. Yet that has seemingly been enough to bring us to our knees, and for many people to send them hiding under their bed, or at least to stuff their faith under the bed so nobody sees it. And
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about it already, but in what ways do you see Christians being cowardly, either on social media or in public life, just in every day-to-day kind of things?
I think the most basic thing is, and I lump myself in with this, that I think if you were to look at the average Christian and follow him around for a day and see what he does and listen to how he speaks and what he talks about and how he dresses, just everything about him, and then you were to compare him to the average atheist walking around out there, you would see no real difference. They'd be interchangeable. I think for most Christians in the culture today, their faith just has almost no bearing on what they do at all. It's just we just live our lives. The media we consume, what we do for entertainment. And we've set up, in some of these cases, we've set up little fortresses where we believe that that these things should be impervious to faith, if the faith is irrelevant to them. And so I think that's where, it's not just cowardice. I think there's a lot of things lumped in with it, but I think that's where you see the cowardice manifest itself.
Yeah, when I started reading this book, I was feeling a kind of being quite judgmental, maybe in a proper way, I suppose, towards the culture and Christians within it, but it wasn't long until I had the terrifying realization that you were talking about me, and
me too.
I know, and you made that clear in the book, which I really liked. Yeah, you're not pointing your finger at everyone and saying, "Look at you, bunch of cowards." You give examples.
Yeah, and I think
yourself,
that's an important point, because maybe as you know, when you try to talk about these issues on a public stage, you talk about morality and faith, it's inevitable you're going to be accused of being self-righteous and holier than thou. It's just for some people, it's a reflex. The moment you talk about morality, there's you're self-righteous. And of course, it's hard to defend yourself against the claim of self-righteousness without sounding self-righteous. That's part of the problem. But I think that being self-righteous and holier than thou is somebody who puts themselves forward as the moral example and says, "Do what I do, everybody." That is self-righteous. And I really try not to do that. And the reason is that I honestly, it's not about being humble or something. It's just I don't have that high of an opinion of myself, and I know that I'm not an example to follow. I don't want people to follow my example. I wish I was a better example to follow. So whatever whatever insights I can hopefully maybe bring to bear in the book about what it's like to be, a lazy Christian struggling. It's because I've been down in the muck with everybody else, and so I'm making observations down here with everybody else about what it's like.
One of the examples you gave, which I liked because it applied to me too, you said you were somewhere on vacation, you were at a church, and the priest started educating people about how they ought to dress.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, because I have to say I often fall into that category as well, and maybe why it's important to dress well.
Yeah, he was. I forget where we were on vacation, but we went to a church. And in my experience, first of all, on vacation, going to church is always an interesting. You never know what you're going to get.
Oh,
exactly. Yeah. It's like a box of chocolates. And but in this case, it was a really good church, and the priest was really firm, and he got up there and he gave a sermon about. It touched on a bunch of different things, but he was especially talking about the reverence that we bring to God, to faith, to the church, and how it reflects on the seriousness of our faith. And he called people out for wearing shorts and flip-flops and wow. jeans and that sort of thing. And then, of course, I look down and I'm dressed exactly as he's describing. And he's just looking at you describing like red shorts, for example. Right. Birkenstocks. Tall, lanky guy right there. And so I'm feeling, and I did, at first I had this reaction of feeling personally attacked. It's like, who is this guy? Like, what are you doing? I showed up here. Isn't that good enough for you? I came, I'm on vacation. I didn't bring formal clothes. Not my fault. So I had that feeling at first, and I was mad at him. But then I had to stop myself and realize that no, what he's saying is exactly correct. And if I happened to be one of the lucky ones sitting there in my formal attire, I would be nodding and saying, yes, exactly, yes. See, look, all these heathens in there. Yeah. So I knew that, and then of course it was awkward going up for communion, and I tried very much to not be in his line. So that's just one example. It's a small thing. It's very easy for us to say, who cares how you dress at church, because God will take you any which way, which is true. But and listen, if you're dirt poor and all you have are tattered rags that you can wear, then wear them and come to church. But most of us, that's not the case. Most of us, we've got iPhones and we've got 3 TVs in the house. And we've got all this stuff. Like you can afford to get at least a pair of khakis and a button-down shirt or something, and you just don't care to. It's not important to you.
Hey, if you enjoyed that clip, you will absolutely love the full interview, so click right there to enjoy the whole thing. Also, a big thanks to these groups who made that interview possible. Learn more in the show notes below about these guys. They're absolutely incredible, and honored to have them as sponsors. Oh, and also, if you haven't subscribed yet, click subscribe and then that bell button. That way YouTube will be forced to let you know when we put out more content.